You're listening to the Cinemental Podcast.
Shall we begin?
Welcome back to the Cinemental Podcast, where we discuss mental health themes from cinema, television, and popular culture. I'm Jeffrey Jones, and I'm a filmmaker and professor, and I'm joined, as always, by my brother, Dr. Joshua Jones, who, aside from having Baby Shark perpetually in his head, is also a general and forensic psychiatrist.
Jeff, thanks for having me back on our podcast. I have no idea why I said it like that. That's weird, and I wish I could take it back. But you know, it reminds me as we start to talk about Jaws, it reminds me of the iconic quote by President Roosevelt at the dawn of World War II, where he said, "We have nothing to fear but giant fucking sharks."
That's right. We have nothing to fear but fear itself and spiders. Wait, what? I don't like spiders, guys. I just don't like them.
I can't stand up and walk away from them. I don't like spiders.
Not a fan. All right, well, we want you to start your week off right with our podcast, so we drop a new episode every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. And if we don't make that deadline, I just drop them whenever I feel like it. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch our hottest, spiciest clips and full episodes on the YouTubes. Josh, you said it earlier. You told the name of the film we're covering today. It is Jaws, which is, of course, a movie about a lovable but hungry sea animal just trying to get a meal when three fleshies use unfair technology to hunt him down in his home.
Jeff, is it Jaws' fault that evolution created him to be just the perfect eating machine? No.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
He's perfect. Just let him eat, you know? Yeah. All right, well, so what are the topics we're going to cover today, Josh?
All right, Jeff, well, putting that aside, we are going to talk about fear, and we're going to talk about phobias and what the difference is.
Oh, I love that.
We're also going to talk about the most interesting character in all of moviedom, in my opinion, which, spoiler alert, it's Quint. And Quint's got some really hard-earned PTSD that he says is from an episode that happened in real life. And so we'll talk about that.
Yeah, who is Quint in the film, Josh? Who is Quint in the movie?
Quint is the crusty old sea captain and shark hunter and bounty hunter that
helps the sheriff.
Helps the sheriff and the scientist go after Jaws. And then finally, we're going to talk about the psychology of the Blockbuster, which is just fascinating and something that I think we're all thinking about in our own way in this day and age.
Interesting. Can't wait to dive into that. All right, so Josh, Jaws is actually a movie where a great giant shark, that's not what they're called. A giant great white shark begins attacking swimmers in a small beach town. The local police chief teams up with a shark hunter and a marine biologist, ragtag group, and that's honestly a great group. Like, they did a really good job to stop it before the town's tourism season collapses. As the body count rises and local leaders refuse to act, the three men are forced into a deadly hunt that becomes as much about fear and survival as killing the shark. And Josh, that's the theme of Jaws.
Yeah.
It's fear and how we deal with fear. Every major character represents a different response to fear. Brody, who's the sheriff, he fears the water from an earlier incident, I think as a kid, where he almost drowned, but he takes responsibility anyway, goes out on the boat. Quint, who you mentioned, masks his fear with obsession. Hooper, the Richard Dreyfuss character, intellectualizes fear, tries to make sense of fear. And then the town leaders just put their head in the sand because money matters more than people. And that's why this movie works so well. It's not just big shark attacks people. It's about fear. So, Josh, let's start by talking about fear. Cool. You had mentioned fear versus phobia. Let's start there. What is the difference between fear and phobia?
Well, fear is an incredibly natural, not only human, but universal emotion for all sentient creatures. Even those that are not sentient have a response similar to fear, where they sense something that might harm them and they recoil, they retract. So fear is that sense that something's going to get you, and it's totally normal. Everybody experiences fear. Of course, it's a spectrum, so some people experience fear a lot, some people experience fear less. It's what we then do with it that really determines our fear reaction. But fear is totally normal and not at all pathological. So, Jeff, the difference between fear and phobia, I know after being on this podcast for all these episodes, I know you now know what turns something from a non-pathologic emotion into a pathologic mental health condition.
I do, but you say it better.
Oh, no. Oh, Jeff, no, I think you say it better.
I don't think I do. I don't think I do. I think
So the big difference between a fear and a phobia being a mental health disorder, is that the fear impacts your behavior.
Impacts your behavior. Yeah.
Or functioning.
See, I knew it.
It just impacts your behavior or functioning in one or more spheres of your existence. So somebody with fear may, try to avoid something or have a reaction when they see a spider. Right. But when push comes to shove, somebody with just a fear of spiders is going to still smash the spider or whisk it out the door or, marry it and create a life with spiderlets. And
is that a movie I'm unaware of?
That's arachnophilia.
That's fantastic. Hold me with your 8 legs.
Yeah, but in this movie, the Rob Schneider character, Brody, nope. The Roy Scheider character, Brody, that would be a wildly different movie if Rob Schneider. Brody.
That's fantastic.
Okay, the Roy Scheider character.
You can do it. I really want to eat some people. You can do it, shark.
You can do it. Okay, Roy, the sheriff, Brody, has a phobia about water. He, actually has some flashbacks, has reactions to it that does impact him in a variety of settings. He chooses, as you pointed out, to take responsibility anyway, to actually take a job as a sheriff in a beach town and then, go on the boat when he's absolutely petrified of it, which, by the way, is absolutely what you need to do if you have an actual phobia. That is actually a form of facing your fears. It's where we get that term, facing your fears. Facing your fears actually does help degrade your phobic response to a fear stimulus, and is the mechanism that therapists use with patients with phobias in something called exposure response prevention therapy, where you expose yourself to more and more serious forms of the stimulus, from either imagining it all the way up to actually, sitting in front of, like, let's say, a spider, so that you can learn to repress and sublimate those, tamp down those phobic responses.
Josh, is that sort of up to the individual if they want to do that, or are there times where it is a necessity to do it? For instance, like, let's say if someone has a fear of, like, going outside.
That's actually a very common one called agoraphobia.
Right.
It can be incredibly disabling for folks if they have a fear of going outside. Obviously impacts you in a variety of very serious ways. In mental health treatment, it's very rare that we force anybody to do anything. I might say, hey, I think that you really need to do this, but it is up to the person to decide whether they want to or not. Obviously, it takes on a different kind of level of necessity when it's a fear of doing something. It's very easy to avoid the therapy that will expose you to your fear. And so it can, if somebody is motivated to do it, it can be very, very effective. But if they are not motivated to make the change for whatever reason, then there's really not a whole lot that anyone can make them do. It's often very hard for family members to understand when they have somebody with, like, agoraphobia, or, for instance, hoarding, which is not a phobia, but it is in the obsessive, compulsive type spectrum where the fear is, hey, I might need this someday, so I will keep it to the nth degree.
Right.
It's often very difficult for family members to understand that you really can't make somebody do something that they don't want to do.
Is that what's going on with people who have some sort of OCD, Josh? Is there's an underlying fear?
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So the obsessive thoughts pop in.
Right.
It's usually it's usually an anxiety of some sort and anticipation. Oftentimes, what will happen is that somebody will have a very anxiety-provoking thought that recurs to them. That's the obsession, such as, and this is common, I think I hit someone in my car.
Interesting. I didn't know that was so common.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty common one. And they may even know. Obviously, I didn't, but it's the thoughts there. The thoughts there. They find themselves going back and checking. They find themselves driving around in circles. Did I hit somebody? Which, by the way, perpetuates it, right? Because they go, oh, did I hit somebody that time?
Sure.
So it can perpetuate. So they may develop a different response, such as if I tap my head 3 times, I can get rid of that thought. That response is then the compulsion to deal with the obsessive thought. And that's where OCD comes from.
Man, I had no idea. I just thought it was like, it's just the way that their brain ticks. Like not being able to step on a crack or whatever. Interesting.
Because of the fear that stepping on that crack is going to have some unrealistic or unreasonable effect in the universe. So
okay.
What's the old phrase? Step on a crack, break your mother's back. That
Right.
didn't come from nowhere. That came from somebody's obsessive thought.
Interesting. Yeah, Winsy says that to me all the time when we're walking, and then she'll be like, Dad, you're stepping on cracks. I was like, my mom's dead. There's nothing I can do. So I'm just going to step on all the cracks. So you should avoid them, but Winsy, I'm good.
For more parenting advice.
Exactly. So let me ask you this, Josh. If there is somebody who has a phobia, will you like stack their phobias in order to help them get rid of it? Like if they're agoraphobic and arachnophobic, you just fill their house with spiders?
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what you do, Jeff. You should do that.
That's all I do as a psychiatrist, Jeff. It's just go around and filling people's houses with spiders. All right, let's get it back to Jaws. So you think Brody has a phobia of the water that he is able to overcome because of his sense of responsibility to the town.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. What about Quint? Is just Quint, because he just is like, all right, I saw 800 of my friends get eaten by sharks, which the event that he describes is a real event that happened. There was a World War II boat that was sunk, and 800 of the 1,100 crew members were attacked by sharks. In this movie, he was a part of that crew, and now he's a shark hunter. Is that a phobia? Is that a natural response to this sort of thing? What's going on with Quint? Thank you.
Yeah, so Quint has post-traumatic stress disorder. So he experienced this incredibly traumatic event, by the way, in the midst of war. Quint has since developed many of the symptoms that tell us that he has PTSD, such as a social withdrawal and really an avoidance. He actually has an avoidance of sharks, interestingly enough.
Okay.
Even though he's going out and trying to kill them, that really is the avoidance. He wants to go out and destroy these things,
Right.
And not have them be there. So yeah, so he goes the full kind of obsessive path, but he's obviously a very damaged character psychologically, which just makes him all the more compelling.
Yeah, and how common is that? Because I thought that was really fascinating. I mean, the first time I watched it, I don't know that I had any sort of like understanding of mental health. And now that I'm watching it, I'm like, man, that's really fascinating. And I think about like times in my life where like I fell off a bridge when I was a kid, rappelling, took a 30-foot fall. And as soon as I was well, I got right back into rock climbing, got right back on a bridge. I wanted to conquer that fear. I sort of became a little bit obsessed with it. And part of it was like, I got to get over that fear. I don't even know that I was necessarily made afraid by the incident, but there was this like obsession to overcome it. How natural is that? Is that normal, or is that a certain percentage of people are wired that way? Like, what is going on? Because I don't think that's a universal response.
Yeah, it's not. For most folks with post-traumatic stress disorder, they do their best to avoid the things that will remind them of the trauma. Right. Quint's trapped in something a little bit more complex because he's got both PTSD and quite a bit of survivor's guilt. So his
survivor's guilt is well said. Okay.
Yeah, and so his obsessive, suicidal hatred of sharks is actually a maladaptive coping mechanism for his unresolved wartime trauma. Okay, so notice how he masks his vulnerability with toxic, hypermasculine bravado. Right. He's not just hunting a shark to cash a check. He's trapped in a lifelong fight or flight response, trying to conquer the sharks that ate his friends 30 years ago.
Yeah. And going out on his ship at night, destroying the radio that could lead to his safety, getting drunk. That's all part of the survivor's guilt of like, hey, I should have died with the sharks. Why did I get to survive? Maybe I'll get eaten by one and the world will be made whole again.
That's right. He is trying everything in his power to die by a shark without just jumping into a shark-infested water.
Man, that's what, and that's pretty common because you would call that because of survivor's guilt. Like, yeah, do you engage in that without survivor's guilt?
You certainly can. Although most folks with PTSD have some idea or some feeling of guilt that they should have prevented what happened to them, or even if they had no control of it. You'll actually see this a lot with folks with PTSD from childhood. They will attribute to their childhood self characteristics far beyond what they could have done as a child. So for instance, somebody who witnessed their family member physically abuse a sibling and is traumatized by it will often feel guilty that I should have been there to stop it. Even if they were like 6 years old, they'll be like, well, I should have stopped it. And they will feel guilty about that. That is a form of survivor's guilt. And the fact is that there's nothing you could have done. In this case for Quint, there's nothing he could have done, and yet you still have survivor's guilt. Man, I'm having a very difficult time speaking today. So yeah, I mean, it is very common.
It's interesting. Like I think about certain times in my life where I don't have any manner of survivor's guilt, but I certainly I kind of want to get bit. I'm just curious what the experience would be like to have the accident. I have had those moments in my life, and I don't know, if that's some sort of psychological issue, but I'm like, I'd kind of like to get in a car wreck and see what that feels like. I'd kind of like to fall off this rope and see what that feels like. I'm fascinated by what it would feel like to have a negative experience. I don't know. And maybe I should look at that with my therapist. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I actually have some good advice for that, Jeff. So if you really want to get in a car wreck, if you really want to fall off the rope, don't.
Thanks, man. Are you going to fill my car with spiders?
I'm a highly effective psychiatrist.
You are a highly effective psychiatrist. And Josh jokes around with me because he's actually not allowed to psychoanalyze or give me good advice because you can't treat family members. So that's why sometimes I'll get the worst advice from Dr.
I am ethically bound to give Jeff terrible advice.
Yeah. Okay, so the Hooper character, played by, I keep wanting to say Robert Downey Jr., but it's by Richard Dreyfuss.
Man, we are recasting Jaws with amazing characters.
Yeah, so played by Richard Dreyfuss. He also has not necessarily a survivor's guilt, but he experienced something that was traumatic in his youth and is now doing everything he can to intellectualize it, but is still drawn towards it, still, is fascinated by it. That's also a common response, I would imagine.
Absolutely. Intellectualization is a defense mechanism. It's considered one of the more mature defense mechanisms against stress or against, traumatic experiences. You absolutely can intellectualize things to the point where you try not to feel anything at all, and you go full Vulcan on it, which is not healthy. You have to feel these things. We're human. It's part of what makes us human is to feel. And so, but yeah, his character intellectualizes what is going on. That can be very useful, and it's why it's considered one of the healthier, more mature defense mechanisms to sublimate or push the emotions aside for a bit so that you can focus on getting down to the facts and dealing with the matter at hand.
Yeah. We mentioned this a fair amount on the podcast, but I think it's also just worth mentioning here again now. As we're talking about fear and people thinking about fear as, and don't stop me here, people thinking about fear as a negative emotion. And one of the things that I love that you're always reiterating is it's not a negative emotion. It is an emotion that is telling you something to yourself. And the absolute importance of not guilting yourself for feeling an emotion, but recognizing what the emotion is trying to tell you and not being like, oh, I'm such a pansy because I fear this and other people don't. That's not what it's about. Fear is telling you something. And I tell my kids this all the time, like bravery isn't not feeling fear. It's feeling the fear and acting the way that you want to act anyway. But there's nothing wrong with feeling afraid. There's nothing wrong with having, certain fears, even when other people don't. Like, there's nothing wrong with these emotions. And I think that's always just important to reiterate.
That's right, Jeff. I mean, you and I grew up in the 80s and 90s. And if we expressed any kind of fear around our peer group, immediately what we would say is, what are you, some kind of pussy?
Yeah.
And, man, that was so damaging. That was so damaging. Even today, when I feel fear in the back of my head, I hear this disembodied voice that could have been one of a dozen different bullies. What are you, some kind of pussy?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And, we just need to remember to train ourselves out of that. And also remember to have empathy for other people who are feeling a fear that you don't. Even if they have nothing but fears that you don't have. It's hard to be afraid, and it's worthy of an ounce of empathy. And having empathy for someone who's afraid in a moment, man, that is just going to win you 1,000 points in their book, to be that person who sees them and acknowledges them and says, like, hey, I'm going to help you through this. Like, it's, we can do this together. Josh, you mentioned Quint being so interesting from just a psychological standpoint. Also, in rewatching this movie, there's a few things that they did that were just kind of dated in terms of, like, how do you introduce somebody in a cool way, sort of thing. And I love the introduction of Quint in this movie, where everybody's trying to figure out what to do, and then he does the nails on a chalkboard, and everybody is, like, silent. And it's like, that would actually work, because I actually hate in movies when everybody's being loud, and then one person's just like, hey! And for whatever reason, they decide to listen to that person. So the nails on the chalkboard work. But then he does this really dick move where he's got everybody's attention and he eats a potato chip. And it's like, you just got my attention, dude. Why don't you not take a moment to have a snack? But I was like, but in a way it's badass. Like, I just got everybody's attention and now you're gonna watch me chow down on this Lay's.
Gonna watch me eat.
Yeah, but man, I should have looked this up. I don't know who that actor is. I know he's
it's Robert Shaw.
Robert Shaw.
It's Robert Shaw.
Wow, his performance was incredible.
Yeah,
I mean, this is like, all three of those guys are just powerhouses, and getting them together on the boat was amazing. And this is gonna now kind of go ahead and say anything you want about Shaw, but this is gonna get me into my
Well, Shaw was an incredible actor before Jaws. He was well known. He was Oscar nominated before that. He was a Shakespearean actor, and just widely recognized as a badass. He did not have a very long career. He died at age 51. But his character, when I first saw Quint probably when I was 5 or 6 watching this Jaws with Dad. He sent chills up my spine, and I was like, that character is badass. And so any characters like that in movies since then, I've always just been like, that's Quint. That's the Quint character.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and it's those guys where it's like, I didn't need anything other than him just telling the story of the battleship. I could have just watched him tell stories all day long. And that's such a great scene. I love the sharing of scars, and he like doesn't bring up that scar until someone else kind of sees it, because he's like, I don't talk about that one, but hey, if you ask, I'll go on.
And Spielberg actually did some really interesting callbacks in Quint's character, in Quint's behavior to the USS Indianapolis. So, when he smashed the radio so they couldn't call for help,
right.
One of the reasons why the USS Indianapolis sinking was so deadly was that no one knew where they were.
Right, and he mentions that in the movie.
Yeah, they were on a secret mission to deliver parts of the atomic bomb, and so nobody knew where they were. So when they didn't report in, nobody knew to look for them for 4 days. And the only reason that they ended up knowing that there was a problem was that a flyover saw some survivors. And that was it. That was the only reason they knew.
I don't believe in karma. But it is events like that where I'm like a little like, maybe there's some universal karma. Not that any of those guys were bad guys, but we were delivering parts of the worst weapon ever. Like they were delivering parts of the atomic bomb, which ended up being the worst weapon in human history. And God was like, I'm going to eat you guys alive with sharks. Like there's a little bit of some sort of thing that's weirdly karmic there. And obviously I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but it's certainly I think the strangest shipwreck in the history of shipwrecks.
Yeah, I mean, I can't be with you on the karma thing there. I
don't believe in karma
so
either.
Horrible.
I'm saying it's just fascinating to me. That's what they were doing. And then that happened, like those are two uniquely specific events to history.
Yeah.
Where they, how many ships delivered parts of an atomic bomb? One. How many massive shark attacks were there? That's a hat on a hat on a hat.
Yeah.
It's an insane coincidence.
Sure. Yeah.
That sometimes I'm like, maybe there's some universal karma. Who knows?
If only it had been a Sharknado, then we really would have known that was karma.
Yeah. All right, Josh, let's talk a little bit about some filmmaking stuff here, because you mentioned it earlier. Quint is, I think, the most interesting character, and I agree with you, which is really interesting because in rewatching this movie, this is obviously a classic. This is obviously one of the best, I would say, horror thriller films ever made. But in rewatching it, it wasn't a great script. It was a good script that was made by an incredible director. And so I just want to highlight some of the things that make Spielberg so good. But one of the reasons why I didn't love this script is the main character being Brody and his fear. He didn't have to overcome anything that in terms of his beliefs. They gave him he's scared of the water, but then he gets in the water. Great. Good job. You overcame that fear. But they made the other characters the most interesting guys. And so I think that if they'd have done a better job with Brody, it would have been a stronger script. But Spielberg is such an incredible director, and I can show this to you just in one scene. Mm-hmm. And it's the scene where a shark attack has happened, and he's trying to watch the water, right? And everybody knows this scene because they use what cinematographers hate to call a zoomie. And it's where you zoom in and dolly out at the same time. And so your character stays in the middle of the screen, but the perspective around you changes. Okay? Cinematographers will call it the vertigo shot, but they don't like the term zoomie. And for obvious reasons, it just sounds dumb. But there's so many different elements of filmmaking in that scene. It is a masterclass in filmmaking, and I anybody who's studying film should go back and watch that scene. He uses what's called an axial cut, which is one of my favorite cuts to use, which is when you're on a character or some sort of subject and you suddenly push in. You don't zoom, you just cut in. But you keep some element in the exact same spot. So imagine like you see my eyes and all of a sudden you're closer to me, but my eyes stay at the same spot in the frame. So that's what's called an axial cut. And he uses that to show importance. He uses the zoomy in that scene. He uses incredible transitions of people walking. Every time somebody walks in front of his point of view, it cuts to back and forth from him to the water. And so those transitions are amazing and they create tension. At one point, he uses a diopter lens, which is a really rare thing that filmmakers use. And what it allows you to do is have a subject in the foreground in focus and a subject in the background that's also in focus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in that scene, someone's trying to talk to him as he's trying to watch the beach. And so as viewers, our attention is drawn to both places but we're trained to look at the thing that's in focus. And so just like him, we're having the experience of not knowing what to focus on.
Oh, fascinating.
And so it puts us in his mentality. He doesn't use music in that scene. It's not till the very end when the dun shows up, because every sound becomes important. Every just flick of the sand he's paying attention to, and so we're paying attention to every sound. He uses the POV predator shots that he's established earlier is the shark, but here it might just be a swimmer. And so every shot is potentially dangerous. You can just watch that scene and see most modern thriller filmmaking techniques. It's a fascinating scene and it still holds up to this day. But all of those reasons are why Spielberg is a master. And he took what was a good script and made it into a great film.
So, Jeff, we're now 50 years removed from Jaws, and all these things that you mentioned are pretty standard at this point. Yeah. I doubt that Spielberg invented all of them, but what was the big jump forward here? Was it him weaving them all together in this particular way? We just know Jaws was the groundbreaking summer blockbuster. Is that true? And is this why?
Yes, a lot is made of his ability to create tension without showing the shark. And what's funny is he wasn't trying to not show the shark. He didn't have the money or the resources to get a shark. And so he had to come up with different ways of indicating a shark. And one of the smartest ones was the use of the buoys. And so they hit the shark with a buoy, and so every time we saw a buoy, we knew that there was a shark. Oh my God, that's so tense. Well, it's also cheap. And so he was able to do these things that he wanted to do in a practical way. And he said some of these things were almost a mistake that he said later. He's like, I learned that the water was scarier than the shark. And he's also, they used an animatronic shark for a couple shots. And, he would say at 32 frames, it was scary. At 33 frames, it looked like a robot, or it looked like it didn't look real.
Yeah.
And so he learned a lot. And a lot of this is how do you make Jaws? You have no experience trying to shoot a shark in the water. You're doing this for the first time. And so when you're doing groundbreaking cinema, you're setting the rules. You're the one who's setting the rules for these things. And being such a visionary director where it's I don't know how to do this. I'm going to have to learn this as I go. It's just one of those reasons why I think Spielberg is so great. And it's also why it's hard for me now to watch his movies, because I see him just doing a lot of things that he's always done, and I'm a little less interested. Spielberg's famous for the oneer, which is a one-take shot that's really long. And so I see those now, and I'm like, it's cool and it's impressive, but I've seen Spielberg do this 1,000 times. And so it's less interesting because it's not as groundbreaking as something like Jaws was. But this certainly was groundbreaking, and part of it was making nature so scary. And so, it helped sort of define the genre. And anytime you're genre defining, Well done, man. It's just well done.
Yeah. I mean, but those are lessons for great leaders and innovators. No matter the genre, the discipline is having the curiosity and the humility to pivot when things aren't going well, and to realize that the water was scarier than the shark. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea was to have the shark be the main character, and they couldn't get the robot to work well. It just didn't work. So
and then they ended up making something that was better. And that will happen all the time in cinema.
And having the humility to be able to
humility and the creativity, humility and the creativity and the ability to kind of pivot is I mean, it's got to be scary to be the guy where it's like, hey, we're going to trust you to do something that's never been done before. And then cut to 20 years later, Josh, or however many years later. What's the scariest part of Jurassic Park? It's when the water shakes. When we first hear the dinosaur.
Right. Amazing.
You got to kind of wonder if Spielberg is the Quint character in real life, just scared of any time water moves. This is him facing his phobia.
Sure. Well, maybe he'll tell us all about it in Disclosure Day.
Yeah.
Another summer block.
Why'd you gotta shit on Disclosure Day?
I hate the title. I hate the title so much, Jeff. I hate it. It's like, it sounds like we're going to watch somebody close on a mortgage. Right? I cannot wait to the sequel escrow event. It just sounds terrible.
All right. Well, Josh, it's going to be a blockbuster. It's going to be something that everybody is going to want to see. Let's talk about the psychology of the blockbuster. This was a massive, massive cultural hit at a time when blockbusters were much more scarce than they are now. We have a blockbuster a weekend now, but that wasn't true in 1975.
And as I'll point out, it's actually not true now. And we'll talk about this waxing and waning of this in a second. But if you can, I mean, neither of us were actually alive in the summer of 75. So imagine it, that if you walked into a crowded room anywhere in America after Jaws had been out a few weeks, you could just hum two notes, dun, dun, and every single person in that room would instinctively feel a chill. When Jaws swam into theaters, it didn't just break box office records. It fundamentally altered our collective psychology. It is widely considered, as you pointed out, the birth of the modern blockbuster, but from a psychological standpoint, it was something much bigger. It was a massive example of shared cultural relevance. Okay? So, from an evolutionary perspective, humans are hardwired to seek synchronization with each other, to seek understanding the world in the same way as others. We look for shared narratives because they create social cohesion. They tell us who we are, what we should fear, and what we value. So when millions of people watched Jaws in the exact same multi-week window, a profound psychological phenomenon occurred, and we experienced a synchronized emotional state. The collective fear of the deep ocean wasn't just a localized phobia anymore. It became a global shorthand. And then the blockbuster became an emotional anchor for society, a unifying text that allowed strangers to speak the same psychological language. The summer blockbuster became an event through which we could understand and shape societal values, fears, and aspirations.
So you're saying it goes deeper than just like we all saw the same movie and it was cool. It's the same, we all had the same feeling. And that's what's more important.
We did. And it's also self-reinforcing. When you realize
What's that? What does that mean?
Well, I was about to tell you. It's self-reinforcing. When you realize somebody saw the same movie as you did and had a similar response to it, what's the feeling that you get?
I feel connected to that person.
Yeah, you feel a kinship.
Yeah.
And so not just that you had the same experience, but you felt similarly about it. And now you feel a different, closer way to that person.
Right.
Now imagine that happening millions upon millions of times each day in a society around a shared cultural experience.
Okay.
Okay?
That's what Jaws was?
That's what happened with Jaws and other blockbusters and other TV events at the same time during these times in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. It was connection with each other that allowed us to have shared language to talk about our societal fears, our connections with each other, and what was kind of going on in our brains.
Sure.
Now, look, we have to look back at that era with a clear eye. Of course, those prior generation cultural touchstones are rightly criticized today for their glaring lack of diverse viewpoints. The, quote, universal human experience we all supposedly shared back then was heavily filtered through a narrow, predominantly white, male Western lens.
The story, great white shark, Josh.
Sure. The stories told on our screens rarely reflected the rich, full tapestry of the human condition.
Sure.
But over time, however, with technological advances and coinciding with a rejection of that narrow lens, mass media became and is deeply fragmented, right?
Okay. So you're saying we don't have the same cultural moments anymore?
I am absolutely saying we don't. Think of it this way.
Interesting.
We went from 3 television channels and 1 dominant summer movie to thousands of streaming platforms, niche subcultures, and hyper-personalized algorithms. Psychologically, this has caused a massive degradation of that shared cultural phenomenon.
Okay.
Today, there's no Jaws. There's no single screen. We live in an era of cultural fracturing where the algorithm feeds you a perfectly curated mirror of your exact interests, while your neighbor is living in a completely different media universe. So you said there's a blockbuster every weekend, and I will say there's absolutely not. Because
sure, I see what you're saying.
Because the audiences that these supposed blockbusters are bringing in, they're not all watching the same movie. There's never going to be another Jaws. You know, you can just look at this in terms of Nielsen ratings and television shows, right? The highest rated television show, or the highest rated television show of all time was the MASH finale, a half-hour sitcom finale that will never ever happen again.
Yeah, because how many people watch the MASH finale?
Half of all people with a television watch that at the same time.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, right? And everybody was talking about it. You'll never have that again.
Yeah.
Yet, sure, you have somebody bring a reel to you and say, hey, look at this, and you guys laugh briefly. But that's not being seen in the same temporal context by tens, even hundreds of millions of your fellow Americans, like these movies and TV shows once were.
Okay, but this isn't me pushing back on that, but I find it interesting because Jaws is actually considered the first feature film blockbuster. Film had been around for decades before we had this massive cultural event like Jaws was. Is it that we don't have them anymore, or is it just really hard to create one?
Well, we don't have them anymore, partly because it's really hard to create one, but also partly because of the availability of all the other, the availability of so much content, the ability for you to have an option to pick something that fits with you,
right.
And that's a little bit of this. That's a little bit of the problem. While I think it is very good for someone to be able to seek out something that fits more with them, like let's say, and I'm just making this up. Let's say that I'm not even going to make it up because whatever I made up was going to sound crappy. But let's say I am not a, young white male who wants to see sharks attack people in 1975, and I've got an option to instead watch something on my phone about poetry. I'm going to pick that. I'm not going to see Jaws. That same phenomenon would be repeated over and over and over again, and you would have very few people seeing Jaws and having that shared cultural phenomenon. Now, what I'm saying here is that shared cultural phenomenon, regardless of how narrow viewpoint it is, did create a comforting sense of collective synchronization. Right. And now we no longer gasp together, laugh together, or fear the water together in a theater packed with strangers, and knowing that we can connect with somebody else who may have seen it in a different theater packed with strangers, but a very similar phenomenon.
Yeah.
Instead, we consume our art in isolation, trapped in our own echo chambers, feeding us basically the same themes over and over again.
But we still go to packed movie theaters. Why do you think we're not feeling that today in the same way?
We're not feeling it together. We're not feeling it in the same way, because even if you go to a packed movie theater, it is not being replicated tens of thousands of times across the country. You can go to a packed movie theater, but it's one of 1,000 packed movie theaters for that movie that week, as opposed to one of 5,000 packed movie theaters for that movie that week.
Yeah.
You can just look at it in the numbers, right? Oftentimes your industry characterizes the great movies as how much money did we make.
Yeah.
But we know that that's a terrible metric of how many people actually watched the movie. So if you go back and you normalize all those dollar amounts, the highest grossing movie of all time was Avatar. If you go back and normalize those dollar amounts, it's actually Gone with the Wind. So many people saw that,
right?
Or movies like Jaws or Star Wars, and it's just not the same, Jeff. The numbers aren't the same.
Yeah, I think about this a lot of times with Michael Jackson, and I don't know that people even argue that Michael Jackson was like the biggest music sensation of all time, but he certainly doesn't have like the record sales that someone like Taylor Swift has now, but he was absolutely the largest pop star of all time. There's a great story Magic Johnson tells about like inviting Michael to come see a Laker game, and Michael's like, I can't, like, you don't understand, like that's not something I can do. And he eventually did have him try, and Michael had to leave within the first 5 minutes because people lost their fucking mind when they saw him. And, he was just a much larger cultural experience than, and maybe part of it is we're used to seeing celebrities more. We have access to celebrities more. I don't know. But talk to me about this psychologically. Like, do you think that this is something that needs to get fixed? Do you think that this is, like, are you just kind of sad about a bygone era? Or is this something that we need to get back to in order to be more mentally healthy?
No, I'm not just sad about a bygone era, because I think what this has done, and this really gets back to the keywords, the echo chamber. What this has done is having so many different platforms in which to consume content, media, news, your particular take on the news, your particular spin on the news, is that we don't have these cultural touchstones that we can connect with somebody over, right? You tell a great story about connecting with a person a dad on a cruise, who's a MAGA
dad on the cruise,
who's my best buddy. Cruise. Yeah. In bygone eras, you very well could have said, hey, Did you see the most recent episode of Seinfeld? Oh man, so funny. Crossing political spectrum. Kind of the only cultural touch point that we have for that right now is sports, right? Because sports is still kind of it's the last remaining live televised thing that we all kind of watch at the same time. But even that is plagued by tribalism, because everybody's got their own team. They're often geographically located and things like that. So I'm not just being nostalgic here. I'm saying that these were key touch points that allied us, saying we had kind of the similar, we were more alike than different. And that, I think, allowed us in bygone times to have more of a similar cultural, social, and even political conversation language with each other, as opposed to the hyper-polarized, hyper-specific, hyper-partisan conflicts that we're having now. Yeah. And I think part of it is due to the fragmentation of the lack of shared cultural experiences.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. And I see what you're saying, and because even something like, I'm trying to think of it, not that there have been any, but what's the closest? I think Jurassic Park, but Jurassic Park is pre-internet. Jurassic Park was a shared cultural moment.
Yes,
I even think Avatar was a shared cultural moment. I do think that like everybody I know saw Avatar, and everybody saw Titanic for sure.
For sure.
Was a shared cultural moment.
That was
again,
the
that's
90s.
90s. Yeah, I am having a hard time thinking of anything in the aughts or later that was a shared cultural moment.
Right.
Even Top Gun Maverick, which was a lot of guys. You could sort of have that moment with guys, but not necessarily women, or on the level that probably we had with Jaws,
Or that we had with Top Gun.
Maybe Infinity War, but not really. I think you're right. I know a lot of people who haven't seen any of the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
That's
we're
really fascinating.
So now we're down to sporting events and tragedies.
Oh.
And for, as I pointed out with sporting events, it's hyperpartisan, or excuse me, it's hypertribalism. Disasters or tragedies isn't really the same vibe.
No, 100%. Oh man, well that is sad. Now I want to go back in time and be part of a cultural event like Jaws.
Well, this is the trap in nostalgia too, and we'll do other.
I had it with Jurassic Park though. I absolutely had it with Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park was fabulous, and we all talked about. I remember talking with my friends. There was at the time Jurassic Park came out. McDonald's came out with the Jurassic Park triple burger meal, and my friends Tony, Matt, and Eric, we were on this crusade on our senior skip day to go get a Jurassic Park triple burger meal at the beach, and that's what we did. And we went and we got it, and man, I have never tasted a burger so good.
I never had a senior skip day. I didn't skip. I never did it. Which I don't know why.
Well, Jeff, we were such goody two shoes. I believe I know our senior skip day was on a weekday like everybody else did it, but they canceled all our classes.
Yeah, they all knew it was going to happen.
Whatever.
Yeah, that's great. Oh man, yeah. All right, it took me a while, Josh, but I came around on that one. Yeah, that is really sad, and you're right. It's only disasters now that we can talk about, and we can talk about kind of. Did you see the thing in the news? It's like our lives have become these sort of cultural touchstones, and they're all based in real negativity. It's not things that we can talk about with each other in a positive way. And I also just wonder, like, are there just too many goddamn people?
Well, that's the other piece, Jeff, that you have to remember when you're talking about this stuff and you're looking back 50 years. The population of the Earth has doubled since then. So even if you did look at the sheer number of people who went and saw the same movie, even if it was close, it's still about half because it's diluted by how much the population has increased.
Yeah, it's so interesting because now we have pockets. Once there's just too much of something, it branches off. And so now you have pockets with certain niche interests, and the people in that niche interest can share and get hyper fixated on that particular thing.
Well,
I would imagine even saying Star Wars Episode 7 was probably a cultural moment.
I think you're really reaching there. You really want it to be, but I think you're really reaching.
Episode 1? Episode 1?
Episode 7?
Of Star Wars.
Oh, Episode 1. Episode 1 definitely was. It was a true blockbuster. I can remember standing 3 blocks away to get
Josh, that's the other
into
part.
That one.
That's the other part about the theater experience. You used to have to stand in line.
You did.
And you would share that cultural moment with people.
Yes,
and now
did.
it's like you can pre-order. Like when I go to my movie theater, I can pre-order my popcorn. I walk right in, I grab it. I don't even have to talk to anybody. I don't have to buy it. It's just like you can have the theater experience. This massive experience with a massive number of people and not talk to anybody. Man, that is sad. We are 2 old guys on a porch right now.
Jeff, here is how it's playing out in real life. My wife and I are watching what I am finding to be a really compelling series called The Following. that came out in 2014 to 2017 with Kevin Bacon. It lasted 3 seasons. It was really good. I have 0 people I can talk about it with.
Yeah.
I can talk about it with my wife, but we're watching it. But nobody else is watching this at the same time. I mean, I guess I could maybe go and find some following Reddit. Well, and now with streaming, Josh, people are making fewer shows because more people are watching things from their past. You know, we have all of this TV that you can watch. Like, why spend a ton of money on new stuff when we can just acquire and feed people the things that, you know, from like the following, you know, so you no longer have these cultural moments like Seinfeld, like the finale of Friends. You know, I mean, that might be the last sitcom massive moment with Seinfeld and then Friends, and then that's probably it. I don't know that even Big Bang Theory never got to the level of it really didn't.
Of Friends went. Oh, that's really sad. Huh. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, that gives me a lot to... I don't know what to do with that is the problem.
So here's what to do with this. With what I just laid out there. The answer to this is that we have to create something new. Is it going to be entertainment? Probably, because it always has been for humans.
Yeah.
So
that is the thing. Like, I was going to say, if you get 5 guys in a room, just sit 5 random guys in a room, within 10 minutes, they're going to ask each other and be talking about what shows you watch and what movies have you seen. And any random 5 guys.
And how many times have you thought about the Roman Empire today?
Absolutely.
But it's always been entertainment, so it's going to be entertainment again. We just have to figure out what is going to be that cultural touch point. And do we want it to be, right? I mean, the real key thing is what this is a stand-in for is human connection. And if we're all staring at our screens all the time, we are not having human connection. Right. We have to figure out how we're going to do that. We have to figure out how we're going to reverse this trend of just being on our screens all the time and have the human connection. How's that going to play out? It's people making individual choices each day to go out and connect as opposed to doom scroll.
Yeah, I mean, this coming from the guy who wants to give up his earthly possessions and move out to the woods.
Without screens, so that I am forced to talk with people once in a while who wander by my property and evade the defenses.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right, Charlie, good stuff. We talked about Jaws a little bit there, but that was a fun conversation about fear. I certainly enjoy. This was a real treat. Sometimes when we do these episodes, I think it's just such a real treat to go back and watch some of these old movies and look at it through a different lens. And man, I'm really glad I watched Jaws again. I'm really glad. That was a great movie.
Yeah, so this is the second time I've seen Jaws in the last year. I actually went and saw it in the theater with 2 buddies it wasn't a midnight showing because we can't do those anymore, but it was like a late 8 o'clock showing for the 50th anniversary on the big screen. It was phenomenal. And I can only imagine how much it blew people's minds 50 years ago.
Yeah, totally. This is sort of apropos of nothing, but one of the most famous parts about Jaws, you ask anybody what's the most famous part of Jaws, and they'll go, dun, dun, dun. What I think is really fascinating about that, Josh, is that was basically stolen from Dvorak's Symphony No. 9. And if you go back and listen to it, like the first 15 notes are exactly the same. And so it's just that reframing of old entertainment is something that I think is really fascinating, and sort of the borrowing of themes is really interesting. What were the early references and what were the early influences, and how do those sort of shape modern media? But I bet most people wouldn't think like that comes directly from classical music. You wouldn't necessarily think about it in that way. Anyway, I have a top 5 list today that I want to get into, and it's a little bit related to what I just said, but we're going to talk about, obviously I was glad that we saw Jaws, we're going to talk about classic films that you can skip.
Now, Jeff, you have a rule about this, don't you?
So I do. So I'm a filmmaking professor, and I share every year with my students that I have a rule that I don't watch any movie before 1980. And this is a little tongue-in-cheek because they will list movies like, well, what about The Godfather? What about The Deer Hunter? What about all these movies? And I'm like, guys, I've seen all those movies. So my rule for myself now is when someone says, oh, you have to watch this movie, I'll say, I don't watch anything before 1980. They get mad. It's just a way for me to trigger people. But I don't need to see the 7th or 8th best Bogart film. I've already seen all those movies. So I'm not saying that as a filmmaker, you shouldn't watch any movie before 1980. But what I am saying is there are some classics that if you want to be a filmmaker, you can skip.
Ooh, Jeff, this feels like you might trigger some people with this list.
Oh, yeah, this is going to be controversial. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for these. But the reason why I think this list is important is because there are some really great filmmakers coming up. And I don't want to inundate them with someone else's nostalgia. So if you watched Some Like It Hot and it just changed you, and you're now a 70-year-old man or woman, people nowadays aren't going to have that same sort of nostalgia for something that you had. It's not going to hit in the same way.
Sure.
And so I think we're doing this generation a disservice by saying, oh, you have to watch all of these classics in order to be a filmmaker. I don't think that's true anymore, and I think that we can update some of these references. And so my top 5 list is the 5 classical movies you can skip, and what you can watch currently to sort of get you the same experience.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. Jeff, do you have any honorable mentions this week?
I don't have any honorable mentions, and if anything, I just have a list of 6 movies. These are in no particular order. Usually we do a top 5. I don't need to rank these. I think that these are just 6 movies that you can skip. So my number 6 is Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver is a movie about a lonely Vietnam veteran who descends into obsession and violent delusion while driving through a decaying New York City at night. Themes: alienation, masculinity, loneliness, the psychological damage of social isolation. There's a lot of movies that do this, I think, similarly, if not better now. Nightcrawler is a great example. Todd Phillips basically just redid this with Joker, which was based on an early Scorsese film. There's not a lot from Taxi Driver that I think is a necessity to watch now. And if you really want to experience Scorsese, you still can. He's still making a lot of movies, and I think that he continues to break ground. And so Taxi Driver is one that I think you can skip if you're a modern filmmaker.
Okay. All right. So Taxi Driver, you heard it here first. Jeff thinks is a terrible movie. Out.
Not at all. Not at all.
Jeff, your next one.
Okay. The Deer Hunter. Deer Hunter, a group of working-class friends return from the Vietnam War emotionally shattered and unable to connect with normal life. You've got themes of trauma, friendship, and the emotional destruction caused by war. This movie is obviously famous for the Russian roulette scene. Just watch that scene on YouTube. Obviously, there's a lot of emotional thrust that goes into that scene. It's a famous scene. Everybody should watch it, but you can skip the whole movie, including the 1.5 hour long wedding that starts the movie, The Deer Hunter. It's so incredibly boring. There was no reason to include the entire thing. The movie doesn't even start until 1.5 hours in. The Deer Hunter is one of those where even when I watched it, I didn't think that it was very valuable. And if you want to watch something with similar themes, watch The Hurt Locker. The Hurt Locker is an amazing exploration of someone who's sort of addicted to war. And in the end, he returns home and he has a real hard time, coming back. He realizes he's really good and has found purpose in war and returns. Hurt Locker is incredible. And I think that you can substitute here Hurt Locker for The Deer Hunter.
Yeah, as you were talking, it made me think of American Sniper as well.
You could absolutely put American Sniper and get a lot of the same themes, I think.
Okay. Breaking news, folks. Jeff hates The Deer Hunter. Okay, moving on. Next,
such an asshole.
Next movie that you're going to crap on, Jeff.
All right, these are 4 where now I'm going to start to get a lot of hate, I think. Let's talk about the greatest movie of all time, Josh. Let's talk about Citizen Kane.
Oh, let's.
Yeah, often thought of as the greatest movie in history, Citizen Kane, a journalist, investigates the life of a dead media tycoon in an attempt to understand what made him so miserable. Themes of power, ego, isolation, and the emptiness of success. This movie was famous because of its revolutionary cinematography and a character study into a man obsessed with success. Here's the thing about revolutionary cinematography. Revolutionized doesn't necessarily mean you have to go back to it to understand it.
Right.
And a lot of the, what he did in terms of the cinematography, has been done better since. And in terms of a character exploration, There Will Be Blood, I think, is a better movie. And the only man who can keep up with or outpace Orson Welles, Daniel Day-Lewis. So I think that you can just watch There Will Be Blood instead, and you'll kind of have the same experience. I watched Citizen Kane when I was in my early 20s. It did absolutely nothing for me. And I watched a lot of the classics in my 20s, and they blew me away. Citizen Kane did not. And if you want to watch Orson Welles in a performance in the 80s that was absolutely transformative, watch him as Unicron in the animated Transformers from 1986.
Jeff, I think, the animated Transformers movie from 86 is underrated in terms of how good of a movie it is.
I continue to come back to it as at least in my top 10 films of all time.
Yep.
I mean, it really was tremendous storytelling.
Yep.
They didn't just try to make things for kids back then. They tried to tell great stories, and it is intense. That is an intense film.
I had an English professor in college who made us watch Citizen Kane, and he made us look at all the revolutionary cinematography of how some of the cameras moved and things, and every single one of us was like, we've seen this 100 times in 100 other movies.
Yeah.
And
if you're a cinematographer and you're looking at it in a different way, I'm telling you, as a director, I think that there are things that are more interesting to watch now. Sure. I don't get a lot out of it. Anyway.
Okay, next one.
All right, let's talk Psycho.
Okay. All right.
So a woman on the run stops at a remote hotel owned by a deeply disturbed young man hiding a horrifying secret. Themes of repression, voyeurism, psychological fragmentation. This movie, Josh, redefined horror. It shocked audiences. It killed its protagonist early. It broke all the rules. Well, now that the rules are broken, you can just watch the new rules in newer movies. So you don't need to go back and watch Psycho. They basically redid Psycho shot for shot, and it wasn't particularly all that interesting. That's because at the time it was incredible. Now it's a little bit passé. You can watch the shower scene on YouTube, and you should absolutely watch that to just know what it is, but you don't have to sit through the entire film. I think that there are some better Hitchcock to watch. Instead, I would watch Rear Window, and I still like The Birds because it's such an incredibly powerful story of like the hurricane coming and not getting out of its way. But I think you can skip Psycho, and the modern slasher films now are so much better. Longlegs is a movie that just came out that I think is incredible. I think you could watch that instead of Psycho. And even though it's before 1980, I think Halloween was a better sort of slasher film that you could watch and get a lot more out of it than Psycho. Psycho, you can skip it.
Yeah. I would say, it makes me think of even Scream. Scream was kind of a send-up of slasher movies while being a slasher movie, but paid a lot of homage to Psycho and did some things better now.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. All right, next one, Jeff.
All right, here's where cinemaphiles are going to stop watching. Give me 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Okay.
So this movie is about, I don't know. I still don't know. I watched it recently for the first time, and it's essentially a collection of 5 films based around this black rectangle that keeps showing up throughout time. When you ask people what it's about, they tell you it's about Hal. That's only like a fifth of the movie. There's a 20-minute scene where a guy flies through a kaleidoscope. There's this weird ending where, he's talking to some Russian dude in some sort of limbo. It's just really strange, and it doesn't necessarily have a plot. I don't think it's necessary to watch as a film, and a lot of the cinematography of Kubrick can be found in his other movies. If you want to watch the HAL section of 2001: Space Odyssey, watch Ex Machina. Ex Machina is a fantastic film about AI and the danger of AI. I also think Alien was better. So you can watch Alien instead, and I still think people should watch Alien. And oddly enough, Josh, if you want to watch the opening scene of 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the gorillas find the orb and then somehow are kind of evolve in a moment, watch the opening of Barbie. Barbie did a send-up of 2001: A Space Odyssey with girls like ditching their dolls. Man, it was fantastic. It was really good. It said the same thing. It was done in a modern way. I know that saying you can substitute Barbie for 2001 is blasphemy, but you can. And everybody should watch Barbie, and you'll see the opening scene from 2001, and you'll get it.
Okay.
Oh, also Barry Lyndon. If you want to watch Kubrick at his finest and get the same sort of experience of his cinematography, I would watch Barry Lyndon instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Jeff. That means that if in your top 5 list, you've got your 6th one coming up.
Correct.
What is it?
All right. This is one where now I'm going to get people coming to my house and trying to burn my house down. And it is the greatest script ever written, Chinatown.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a movie about a private investigator uncovers corruption, greed, horrifying secrets while investigating a seemingly simple adultery case in Los Angeles. This was famous because it was peeling the onion, the layers upon layers of unfolding drama. This has just been done better recently with movies like Zodiac and Spotlight, and Margin Call was a movie that I think people could watch. What was the Adam McKay movie about finance?
Oh, The Big Short?
Yeah, the Big Short did a great job of handling just a massive event and the sort of undoing. There's just been better noir films since then. I don't know that. I think Chinatown's a bit of a slog by today's standards.
Wow.
And I think that there are some better scripts that you can cover. A lot of Fincher films I think you can watch instead of Chinatown.
There you go. There you have it. You have Jeff's top 5 list of 6 movies that you can skip watching. Jeff, what's really funny about this is I have on this list, I have seen Citizen Kane, and that is it.
Wow. Okay, there you go. You're also not a filmmaker.
No, I am not. I'm a podcaster, but not a filmmaker.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, Jeff, if you don't want to watch those ones, let me rephrase this. Are there any classic movies that you think filmmakers should still watch?
Yes, and so I've got the bonus top 5 for this week, which if you've got the movies that we shouldn't, there are some classics that I do think stand up, are still must-watch TV or must-watch cinema for cinemaphiles or anybody who wants to be a filmmaker. Jaws is my honorable mention here.
Okay.
I think you still need to watch Jaws. I think that there's a mastery that can start to happen when you make films on the cheap and figure out ways to make things scary or figure out ways to show an emotion or show an event on a budget. I saw a short film recently where a guy wanted to show a rocket launching, and he just had dirt on a sieve and just shook the dirt, and it just looked like the ground shaking underneath a rocket. And I was like, there's a lot of ways that you can sort of cheat some pretty heavy effects. And just for that scene in Jaws, Spielberg uses some pretty incredible filmmaking techniques that I think are still worth it today, and I still think it holds up as a watch. I don't think Jaws is boring. I think it's fun to watch.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah.
Agree. Okay, what else?
All right. So number 5, The Exorcist. The Exorcist is must-watch film because it's a reminder of what's actually scary in films, and it's the psychology and not the CGI. Modern films rely way too heavily on CGI and girls climbing on the wall. And when you go back and watch The Exorcist, you start to understand what is scary. And it's the slow unraveling of a mother trying to protect her kid. It's a man who's lost his faith coming back to it. It is still scary as hell. I 100% think that film students still need to watch The Exorcist.
Yeah, that's a great call out. We, listeners, go back and look at our archived covering of The Exorcist, which we did for this podcast. First time I had seen it, and I came away with my mind blown about how scary and good it was. Even with all the jump cuts and everything, it was still really good. So, All right, Jeff, number 4.
So number 4, I'm going to go with The Seven Samurai. And I thought highly about whether to put Kurosawa on the you don't have to watch him anymore. I do think that every filmmaker should watch at least one Kurosawa film, and I think that you should watch The Seven Samurai. There are things he does specifically with the use of shadow that are not being done as well now. And studying Kurosawa, I think if he was still directing today, he would still be considered a master. And I don't think anybody's doing what he did better. I think that they're doing it differently, or it's sort of a dumbed down version. So I still think that Kurosawa is worth watching. And for my money, watch The Seven Samurai. It's been the inspiration for a lot of other films.
Yeah.
It's essentially about Seven Samurai going to protect a town. Magnificent Seven, was inspired by it. There's a lot of movies that are inspired. I do think that it's still worth watching, and you can be like, aha, that's how to do that shot. Kurosawa is still worth watching.
Okay, number 3.
All right, number 3, we're going to go with Apocalypse Now.
Sure.
There have been movies very similar to Apocalypse Now, and I don't think that there's anything about the filmmaking that was so groundbreaking that it's not even being done better now. But there's a certain grittiness and obsession that is inherent in that movie that you can still see, and it just is a reminder. You have to suffer a little bit for your art.
Okay.
And you have to be obsessive. And you have to be willing to go to a really deep place in order to make great cinema, and you can see it in every frame of Apocalypse Now. Brad Pitt remade Apocalypse Now and called it Ad Astra. It's essentially the same film, and it's just too clean. There's no obsessiveness in it. It's just bland in comparison. Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Sheen basically went out and did a crapload of drugs and came out of this film, or came out of this experience forever changed, and just put it all on film. And it is just still worth watching beginning and end to this day. And Brando's performance at the end is incredible.
Okay. All right. Number 2.
Number 2, for sort of similar reasons, Rocky,
Yes.
I still think is worth watching. Same reason as Apocalypse Now. You see Sylvester Stallone's passion in this movie, and it's really inspiring to see that passion. Also, oddly enough, this movie has the longest first act in cinema history. And I don't know that for a fact, but it is an incredibly long first act.
Okay.
Usually first acts of films are somewhere between like 20 and 30 minutes, 20 and 30 pages. This is almost a full hour of the first act of setting him up and setting up what his sort of wants are. And it's a really interesting character study. And you can't make that kind of movie now. And so I think it's still worth watching. But yeah, you can just feel one man's obsession to get a movie made. So I still think Rocky's worth seeing.
All right. Yeah. Great call. Okay. And your number 1 movie classic that people should still watch?
Number 1, I wanted to put this on the you don't have to watch it anymore list because I wanted to be super controversial, but I couldn't because I was wrong. And I just thought about it a long time and I was wrong. You still have to watch this movie. You got to watch The Godfather. What I love about modern mafia tales or criminal power tales like Wolf of Wall Street, like Casino, like Goodfellas, is there's the rise and fall. And it's the rise and fall of an empire. And that's oftentimes what gangster films are. It's the Roman Empire. It's the rise and the fall. Godfather wasn't about that. It was about the battle between honor and duty. And Michael Corleone is the reluctant rise to the head of the family. And Brando doesn't want his kid involved in it at all. But he's really smart, and he has to battle that sense of, of honor and duty. And eventually he becomes the head of the family. And that final scene where he shuts his wife out and he's just lied to her and he's fully become the Don is an incredibly important scene. Some of the sound design in this film is incredible. The scene where he, shoots the cop, they don't have a score under that. They use a train going overhead to drive the tension. And so it's a really good masterclass in using sound within the scene to drive tension. It is still worth watching, and I don't think you can skip it.
Wow, great. Wow, that's great list. Bonus top 5 list.
Yeah, bonus top 5. Yeah, we'll probably just cut all that together in one long top 5. But Josh, anything you missed? Any classics you remember watching that you hated?
Biodome. I think you missed Biodome. And I think you missed Leprechaun Back to the Hood as a couple classics you still need to watch.
All right. Thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental.
No, Jeff, great list. I mean, you're the master, you're the expert here. I think that's great. I mean, obviously you can't shut out all movies pre-1980 because then you would shut out Alien, then you would shut out Star Wars, which I think people absolutely need to watch. Alien still holds up. It is just tense, and they just do a great job of creating tension and a universe there that has spanned many movies since. What's really interesting, Jeff, is that I'm now going back and watching some classic movies that we grew up with my 18-year-old son, because he's actually really interested in where some of these franchises like Predator, Aliens, Terminator, that are still making movies, where they actually came from. So we're going back and watching some of these franchises from start to finish. Some movies we're skipping because they're just terrible. But we just watched The Terminator the other day, and it does not hold up.
Interesting.
It is just, it is so hairsprayed with 1980s that it just doesn't do a good job of it. And I did tell him, I mean, I like both these actors and things. I told him that, when Terminator came out, it was kind of a coin flip, even though Schwarzenegger was billed first, as to who was going to end up being the bigger action star, Arnold Schwarzenegger or Michael Biehn. And we watched it, and my son was just like, man, Biehn is overacting every scene. This is just not good. It was just so intense. So,
did you know Cameron wanted Arnie for the Michael Biehn role?
Oh, really? No, I didn't know that.
He wanted him for the Michael Biehn role, and Arnold didn't want to do it. But he had some real thoughts about the Terminator. And the thing that he told Cameron was, you got to do the robot right. And Cameron said, what do you mean? And he said, for instance, he can't look at his gun when he reloads. So whoever the actor is has to get so good at reloading his gun, he can do it staring straight ahead, because that's how a robot would react. And so he had all of these things that he thought were important about the robot, that James Cameron in that meeting was like, holy shit, Arnold is the robot.
Yeah.
And so he didn't go into it thinking that, but Arnie inadvertently talked himself into it, or talked Cameron into that role, and then Arnie became interested in it. But yeah, Arnold was originally thought for the Michael Biehn role, and how was he not thought of for the term? We think it's so obvious now, but sure, back in the day, we want to get a big movie star for our movie. Let's get Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the rest is history. But I've just always thought that story was fascinating. Just how things get made is always interesting to me.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Josh. Any last thoughts on fear?
Jeff, I think to tie this all together, fear is a very normal, everyday human emotion that we all have. And one of the things I think that we need to really buck against is this push to fear each other. We are not the enemy to each other. And I think that a lot of people just don't get that. And a lot of people are making a lot of money off of making us feel like we should fear each other. Cultural touchstones and events such as Jaws, other blockbusters, and shared television shows that we watch throughout the ages really have served and can, I think, serve again as ways for us to talk through the psychological, the cultural, the societal fears, aspirations that we have with each other using shared cultural languages. I'm not sure how we're going to get there again with our hyper-fragmented media culture. But I think it's important that we see opportunities to get off our miniature screens, talk to each other, see a movie with each other, experience a cultural event together, and really talk to people who aren't just watching the same algorithm as us. That's going to be our way forward, and that's going to be the way that we, as a culture, are going to face our fears.
Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, thanks for bringing that home, Josh. All right, thanks as always for watching or listening to Cinemental and our coverage of Jaws. Cinemental is produced by me, Jeff Jones, and edited by David Haverty. If you like this episode, please subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also watch clips of Cinemental on YouTube, where we would love to hear what you would like us to cover next. You can also watch my companion series, The One Thing, where I take a deeper dive into screenwriting, both available on the Large and in Charge channel on YouTube. You can find Dr. Jones on Vine or by following him on Friendster. This has been a Large and in Charge production in association with PMC Media. For Dr. Josh Jones, I am Jeff Jones, and we will see you next week.
See, Jeff, because those platforms don't exist anymore, and so I'm not really on social media.
Oh!
I want you to hit me as hard as you can.